Now, are we back on the air here? Yes, the first half. Then we can give the secret teachings after we get off the webcast. Yeah. Yes, and we can get into the juicy part. All right. So the main difference here in terms of Bön and the Buddhist schools is that of lineage. Looking back to Trungpa Shenrab, but even in the Buddhist tradition, they talk about prehistoric Buddhas. There's a list of 7 Buddhas, beginning with Vipassana, and then there's a list of 24 Buddhas, beginning with Dipankara, all of whom preceded Shakyamuni Buddha. So, in ancient times, before the Muslims came into Central Asia, it was a continuous civilization from North India up through Pakistan, Afghanistan, into the current republics in Central Asia. There were even Buddhist monasteries as far west as Turkmenistan and so on. And so there was an ancient civilization there. So this suggests that, yes, the Bonpo teachings did come from Tazik and Omolungring and so on into Tibet. In particular, Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche, when I was studying with him many years ago, he said there are 2 authentic lineages for Dzogchen, which was what I was particularly interested in. One coming up from India in the 8th century to central Tibet with Padmasambhava Vimalamitra and the Tibetan translator Vairochana. And the other coming from the northwest, from Zhang Zhung into central Tibet. And in particular, that means the Zhang Zhung Nyen Gyud, which is Kama, or a continuous, uninterrupted transmission of the teachings from at least the 8th century until the present time. There are 4 main schools or traditions of Bonpo Dzogchen, and the Zhang Zhung Nyen Gyud is one that never became a Theravada, for the reason I explained before, that the Tibetan king Tisong Desen promised Jerpung Nangsha Lepo that he would never suppress those teachings. And in fact, they also entered into the Nyingmapa tradition when in the 11th century Dzogchenpo went up searching for Bonpo teachings and went to the Dangra Lake and encountered a Bonpo master there, and Shenchen Latse, and took transmissions from him and asked his permission, well, is it okay if I change a few names here and make them Indian so that the Buddhists will be happy with this? And he said, yes, it's okay. What's most important is the meaning of the teachings. And so this section from the Zhang Zhung Nyen Gyud then entered into the Nyingmapa tradition. In fact, there's many old texts, like the Kunchi Jalpo Tantra, for example, which are obviously Bonpo, but were changed a little bit to make them into Buddhist texts. On the other hand, the Buddhist scholars always accuse the Bonpos of plagiarizing their text, changing a few words, such as Che, meaning Dharma, into Bön, also meaning Dharma. But now it's looking increasingly like it was mostly the other way, that old Bonpo texts were rewritten slightly in order to make them into Buddhist texts. Of course, I say this now, probably gets me in a lot of trouble. won't worry about this. So what is the source of the transmission? The source is the Adi Buddha, the primordial Buddha Kuntazanpo. Kuntazanpo in Sanskrit is Samantabhadra, but this is not the Bodhisattva Samantabhadra. This is the primordial Buddha. And in Tibetan, that's Kuntazanpo. The same name is used in both the Nyingmapa and the Bonpo traditions. According to the Zhang Zhung Nyen Gyud, from Kuntazanpo, the teachings pass through 9 enlightened masters. And this is known as the Dershek Gongju, the transmission, the mind transmission of the Sugata. So Sugata or Dershek means a Buddha. And the first of these is the teacher in eternity. I don't have to give you all the Tibetan names, because unless you know Tibetan, it doesn't matter. But the teacher in eternity is Kuntazanpo. So he is the source. From Kuntazanpo, he is the Dharmakaya, the ultimate aspect of Buddha enlightenment. From Kuntazanpo, it is transmitted to the Sambhogakaya, the body of perfect enjoyment. That's the meaning of the Sanskrit name. In the Nyingmapa system, this is Vajrasattva, Dorji Sempa, but in Bön he's called Shenla Urkar. Shen means Shen, Hla means deity, Urkar means white light. So the white light Shen deity. When you do the Ngondro from the Zhang Zhung Nyen Gyud, you visualize Shenla Urkar in the center of the tree. So maybe you've seen pictures of him. He's wearing all the rich robes and jewelry of a Sambhogakaya aspect. Whereas Kuntazanpo is represented as a naked teenager sitting in the sky, 16 years old, because 16 in Indian tradition is the ideal number. It means completeness, 4 times 4. And so it's a symbol of perfection, not that he's literally a teenager. He's shown as being blue, not because he's cold sitting up there in the sky, but because blue is the color of space, and the Dharmakaya is like space, like the sky. And he is shown as naked, not because he's an exhibitionist, but because he is devoid of all discursive thoughts, being the symbol of the nature of mind. So that's the reason for the iconography here. He may be depicted there, sitting alone in the sky, or he may be depicted in Yabyum with his consort Kuntazangmo, who is the primordial wisdom. These then represent the 2 aspects of Buddha in enlightenment. The female is wisdom, the male is compassion and skillful means. So in this tradition, women are both intelligent and wise, a little different from our Christian tradition. From the Sambhogakaya, it passes to the Nirmanakaya, Shenrup Chempo, the celestial pre-existence of Trungpa Shenrup. This is the teacher who is an emanation. The Sambhogakaya is called the teacher who is compassion. The Dharmakaya is the teacher in eternity. And the Nirmanakaya is the teacher who is an emanation, so therefore a tulku. Now from there it passes to, the transmission passes to the teacher who is intrinsic awareness. His name is Tsema Myrdhin. In the book here, there's the descriptions of all these figures and so on, so you can look them up there. We can't get into it here. From him, it passes to to Gyalshen Nangden, who is the father of Chechemi Tsupuk, who is another emanation of Trungpa Shenrab. So, in a higher dimension of existence, then Trungpa Shenrab emanates as this blue cuckoo bird. Now, here in the West, cuckoos don't have much very high status, often used for crazy people. But in Tibet, kujuk, meaning a cuckoo, has very high status as a celestial bird who is the harbinger of spring, because you know spring is coming to Tibet when you first hear the cuckoo on the horizon. And this is the Barnang kujuk, the blue cuckoo of the atmosphere. Barnang is the atmosphere. And he descended from heaven. Now, on top of Mount Meru, in the center of our world, this is all symbolic, so you won't find Mount Meru at the North Pole, but that's where it's supposed to be. There is this evergreen valley, and in there's the crystal cave, and there's this Princess Zhang Zhung Nyen sitting there in meditation. And while she's meditating there, this cuckoo descends onto her shoulder and then impregnates her. And we again get an Immaculate Conception. Now, in the old days, Immaculate Conceptions were happening all the time. It was no big deal. Nowadays, they can't explain this, but it used to happen. So she gave birth to Chechemi Tsupuk, who looked a little strange, that he was kind of turquoise in color, and he had a nice top knot, which is a tsukpu. And he's immortal, so he's Chime. This is the celestial pre-existence of Trungpa Shenrab, through which the Tantric teachings and the Dzogchen teachings are revealed originally. So this preceded the more earthly events in Oma Lungring, where we spoke about the 12 great deeds. Now, in Tazik, in Central Asia, at that time, there was a prince named Sangwa Dupa, and he was a very good meditator. And in his meditation, he was able to ascend into heaven up on top of Mount Meru, where he met Chime Tsupuk and received the transmissions from him for both Dzogchen and Tantra, and then returned with them to Earth, and then went into magical combat against the Drekpa Poju. That means all the lineages of male evil spirits who were oppressing humanity at that time, and he was able to subdue them. So he is then listed as the last of these 9 enlightened beings, these Dershek, and he transmitted then the teachings to 3 disciples who represented 3 different races down here on Earth. The first is Chlaban Yangsung Dakpa. He comes from the Deva race, the race of gods. The second is Luban Banam. He represents the Nagas. Now, in the different cultural traditions of the world, we have the celestial gods who are up there above in the sky and in the atmosphere. And then we have the chthonic, or the deities of the underworld, who connect with the earth and beneath the earth. It's not like in the Christian system where they're good and bad. It's rather different functions, because the chthonic, or underworld spirits, here largely called Lu or Nagas, are connected with the fertility and prosperity of the earth, and so on. The same dualism existed in ancient Greece. We had the Olympic deities headed by Zeus living on top in his palace on top of Mount Olympus. And the religious practices connected with the Olympian gods. You had the temple, and out in front you had the altar, and the offerings involving sacrifice of various animals was done during the daytime. And these were big public festivals. These were in the days before supermarkets and butcher shops. So for poor people, this was largely a source of meat, because there would be such a festival. The rich people would bring animals there, which were then sacrificed. And then they were cooked on the altar. The bones and fat and skin were then offered to the gods, but all the meat was then distributed to the participants in the festival. When the Christians came along, they said, "You people are offering sacrifices to demons. It's not allowed for us Christians to eat that contaminated meat." So butcher shops were invented by Christians. And since then we've moved them into supermarkets. But there was also the offerings made at night to the chthonic or underworld gods down there with Pluto and Persephone and so on. And they controlled the wealth and riches of the earth, but also the prosperity of nature and so on. It's the same way with the Lu. They also are water spirits, so they can bring the timely rains and so on, and are invoked for that purpose. So the transmission of both the Tantric and Dzogchen teachings then went to the Devas and the Nagas. The third individual was Myrdhin. He was a prince in Tazik and a human being, and so it came to him. Now they are part of the 24 masters. This represents the transmission through 24 masters, all of whom are listed in here. So we then have three kinds of transmissions. The first transmission is the Dershek Gongju. This is the transmission of the mind of the Buddhas that went through these 9 from Kuntazanpo down to Sangwadupa. Then from Sangwadupa it was given to the Devas, Nagas, and humans. So here we have the Semba Daju, the symbolic transmission of various beings. With the mind transmission, there doesn't have to be any word said, because the transmission is telepathic immediately from mind to mind. So we don't need a lot of talking like I'm doing now. And so Kuntazanpo did not need webcasts in his day. Then with the Daju, only a few symbols and gestures and so on was sufficient to communicate the teachings. There didn't have to be a lot of explanations in a book and so on. Then we come down to the last of these 24 masters, Tsepong Dawa Gyaltsen, and he then transmitted this to 2 Dharmakaya manifestations, Taparitsa and Jirpong Nangsha Lerpo, and then it passed through many the 6 Mahasiddhas of Zhang Zhung and so on. This is the Druptop Yenju, the oral transmission of the siddhas or adepts. And that required a lot of talking, a lot of explanation. So 3 kinds of transmissions here that descend to us. All right. Now, historically, we come to the 7th century and then the 8th century. And we come to the historic figure Taparitsa. Now, there is in my mind no doubt that he is a historical figure, just as Guru Padmasambhava was, that he lived in northern Tibet, in the area to the east of Mount Kailas. He belonged to the Rasang clan. His father was Rasang Lujao, who was also a lama and taught him Dharma or Bön. But then he came into personal contact with his main teacher, Tsepung Dawa Gyaltsen, who is the last of these 24 masters, all of whom attain the Jalu or the rainbow body. That is, at the time of death, the master does a certain practice known as Turgal, and through doing this, he is able to dissolve the elements of his body back into their pure state of radiant luminous light, the earth element into yellow light, the water element into blue light, the fire element into red light, the air element into green light, and the mind element into white light. And so then their body becomes light and then finally dissolves into space. Now, because it manifests as a rainbow, then it's called a Jalu, a rainbow body. Now, this phenomena cannot be explained in terms of contemporary physics, but this doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It doesn't mean that we now, our Western scientists, know everything and understand everything in the universe. Often they may think that and tell you that in the university, but there are anomalies that are not explained by contemporary models of reality, and the rainbow body is one of them. But the rainbow body is well testified. If you ever read Trungpa Rinpoche's biography, Born in Tibet, he talks about when he was escaping Tibet, there was an old man who was a carver of mani stones. It's a stone that has, in Tibetan letters, Om Mani Padme Hum, written on a mani stone. And that he was a Dzogchen practitioner. But people thought, oh, he's just a regular guy, old man, sitting there mumbling Om Mani Padme Hum and gazing into the sky and this spacing out. But then he manifested the rainbow body, which blew everybody's mind, including the Chinese communists who were there and witnesses to this. And it happened when I was in early days in Darjeeling in 1971 and so on. I met Lama Jutta, who was his son. And so I heard this account from eyewitnesses too, not just from Trungpa Rinpoche's book. Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche had a Dzogchen master named Changchuk Dorje, and at the end of his life, he bid farewell to his disciples and went into a small wooden structure and had it sealed. Often they'll use just a tent, but it depends on he was in there. Well, and then the rainbows began manifesting. Usually the attaining of a rainbow body will take 7 days. And so the local Chinese officials heard about this, and they came there and they said, according to the teachings of Mao Zedong, this is not allowed. Rainbow bodies are not allowed. So they had the police officers break into the cabin, and they found Changchuk Dorje had shrunk to this size. Now, when you have a rainbow body, at the end of the process, the physical body has totally dissolved into space. All the material of the body has returned to its pure form as radiant energy, and then that energy dissolves and dissipates into space. All that remains are hair, fingernails, toenails, and clothing. They remain because consciousness, namshe, does not penetrate them. And so then the Chinese totally freaked out, seeing this miniature image of Changtuk Dorje. They threw gasoline on it and burned the whole structure down. Sometimes in the past, also for some reason or another, the process may be interrupted, and so a small body remains. Such as in Jarong, there's some places there where there are some of these bodies preserved in stupas and so on. People like Geshe Tenzing Wangcha have seen them, and other people have journeyed to that part of Tibet. And more recently, about 3 years ago, when the brother of one friend of ours from Germany, he was in Western China. He was working on reforestation projects and so on, and he got the local newspaper. And there was one Tibetan Lama who did Jalu in a temple there, and again, many people witnessed it. So this is an anomaly that does happen, that can't be explained under present scientific models, but it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. So this happened with Taparitsa. When he was 15 years old, he received the Dzogchen transmissions from Zepung Dawa Gyaltsen. He then went into a 9-year retreat in a cave called Taktap Sengedrak, the Lion Cave, which is still there in Tibet. And he practiced Turgel. At the end of this, he realized Jalu. Now, this is Jalu Poachempo. Normally, Jalu, a rainbow body, is done at the time of death. If you do it at that time, you don't have to go through the bardo. It's a sign of attaining enlightenment. But if you manage to do it while still alive, this is Poachempo, the great transfer. So, Taparitsa is an example of Poachempo. Now, even though such a master attains enlightenment, has realized the perfection of wisdom and all that, there is still great compassion for all sentient beings, and that compassion can manifest as tulpas or emanations. Now, the method of transmission so far is Chikju, that is, and we're talking about Dzogchen here, that a master transmits the precepts of Dzogchen coming ultimately from Kuntazanpo to one disciple alone. So Dawa Gyaltsen transmitted this to Taparitsa. Then Taparitsa, during his lifetime, he didn't have a disciple. But in the next century, there was this master, Jerpong Nangshe Lepo. Now, this title, Jerpong, means literally in the Zhang Zhung language, a teacher of Bon. In the Zhang Zhung language, the word for Bon is Jer. This was taken into Tibet as Jerpa, meaning to chant, to sing and to chant and so on. And Pungpa means a teacher. So Jerpong means a teacher of Bon. And Nangshe Lepo is his name. And he was a Ngakpa or Tantrika, a specialist in the practice of the meditation deity Zhang Zhung Meri, and an expert with magical missiles or Tso. And he was also a Purohit, or a priest, for Likmicha, the last king of Tibet. But as I said, he had retired and gone into retreat at this cave, the Deer Face Cave, next to the Darong Lake, In the book we have a picture of that because John Boletsa was able to visit there. And so Taparitsa then manifested to him. Now, once you attain the rainbow body, your compassion still has the capacity to manifest in visible form, or tulpa. So Taparitsa manifested himself as a small boy. And he went to the tent of the local nomad chief. And this is, nomad country. This was a wealthy chief. He had herds of goats, sheep, and yaks and so on. He was quite wealthy. And this boy came to him and asked for a job. He said he was an orphan and so on. So the nomad chief said, okay, you can watch my yaks and so on. Go do that. You can also collect some firewood and so on. This is a very arid country up there in northern Tibet, just south of the Changtang. And so he's doing that. Well, Jerpong Nangcho Lepo was meditating in the cave, and then the young boy collected some firewood, and he came down there and walked in around the bushes that were in front of the cave, and the yogi looked up and said, "Who are you?" And they got into a conversation, and this boy showed he was very intelligent. So he said, "Oh, well, you must have a teacher. Who is your teacher?" And they got into this, and the boy replied that my teacher is the nature of mind, and so on. And his remarks then irritated the yogi and said, "You're a very arrogant young boy." So tomorrow we will go into the presence of the king, who was in the Chungzong, the Garuda Castle, on the south end of the Dangra Lake, which is the next lake over. And we will have a debate. And if you win the debate, I will put your foot on my head and become your disciple. But if I win the debate, then the king will punish you. And the boy said, "Oh, this is ridiculous. You cannot realize the nature of mind through debating and with conceptions and blah, 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 like that." And suddenly, Jerpung realized this is not just a little boy. This is a Nirmanakaya. And when he realized that, Taparitsa transformed, and he appeared like this, like the tanka behind me, inside a tigle, or rainbow sphere, a sphere of light sitting in the sky. So we put that on the cover of the book. Here's the Darok Lake, and here's Taparitsa appearing inside a tigle. And he's looking like Kuntazanpo, but he's white and crystal and so on. But again, he's nude because the nature of mind is devoid of discursive thoughts and so on. It's all part of the symbolism. At the same time, the nomad chieftain had also shown up. So then Taparitsa gave his first discourse on Bon, on the meaning of Dzogchen to Taparitsa and the nomad chief. A few years later, Jerpong Nangcho Lepo was on this island here, and then Taparitsa again manifested to him in this form. And then you have the second encounter, the third encounter, and the fourth encounter. So then we have these four sections to the Zhang Zhung Nyen Gyud, from these four conversations or revelations coming from Taparitsa. The fourth, they deal with the view, the meditation, the practice or conduct, and the fruit. The four 4th, dealing with the fruit, is the subject of the new book, which I don't have copies of yet, the Precepts of the Dharmakaya. These are the 21 little nails. Little nails means essential points, because in those days we didn't have photocopy machines, we didn't have iPads or cell phones, all this. So if you had teachings in books, books are heavy, to carry around. So a lot just had to be memorized. So you would use memory devices like Ne, essential points, Zerbu, little nails, and so on, key points. And from that, if you remembered them, then the rest of the teaching would follow from there. And so with the 21 little nails means 21 key points in relation to the realization of the natural state of the nature of mind, in particular in relation to the practice of Turgel. Now, you have 3 series of Dzogchen teachings. You may be familiar with this from Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche. Dzogchen Semde, Dzogchen Longde, Dzogchen Menakide, or Upadesha. Dzogchen Semde means the mind series of Dzogchen teachings. Now we have that both in Nyingmapa and in Bon. And this is a more gradual explanation, focusing very much how to find yourself in the natural state of Dzogchen, how to get there. Dzogchen Longde means the space series of Dzogchen teachings. So you begin with gazing into the sky and so on. And then Dzogchen Menakide, or Dzogchen Upadesha. Upadesha means secret oral instruction, something that is not to be spoken aloud, man-ak. And this assumes you already know how to get into Dzogchen, how to get into the natural state. It is like taking your child to the swimming pool, and instead of having him gradually get in the water, putting one foot in, then another, and then holding him up, teaching him to move his arms and legs like this to swim, you just bring him to the edge of the pool, and you push him in. He either sinks or swims. That's the way it is with Dzogchen Menakide. So it assumes you know how to get into the natural state, but then the problem is, how do you stay in it once you get there? Subject for this afternoon. Anyway, so in Dzogchen Upadesha, that is Zhang Zhung Nyen Gyud in the Bonpo tradition. So it's very direct teaching and practice. Now, in there, you have 3 phases of Rushan, Treacher, and Turgel. Now, even though the 2 terms, Treacher and Turgel, are not used in these texts, the teachings are there. They just use different names for it. Now, Rushan means to make a distinction. And this is Korde Rushan Chewa. It means making a distinction between samsara and nirvana. But here, samsara and nirvana, samsara means mind, and nirvana means the nature of mind. And these are various exercises where you discover this in your immediate experience. Now we have these Rushans both in Nyingmapa and in Bonpo. And then the next is called Treacher. Treacher means, Treacher is to cut through, to cut something. And a tekpa is a bundle of sticks around which you tie a rope. So you take a sharp knife and you cut that rope, and the sticks all fall down like this. And the bundle of sticks symbolize all your rigidities and concepts about things, all your intentions and stress and all this. So it's cutting through all your rigidities, your emotional and your intellectual rigidities, including all your concepts about the nature of reality. And this is the term for entering into the natural state of the nature of mind, this Senye Neluk. And so that is the principal practice. The Rushans are like a Ngondro for Dzogchen. Once you go through that, you get a taste, you get a flavor for what is the state of Dzogchen or contemplation, Yamjak or Treacher. But then you have to focus on that Treacher and then eliminate all your wrong conceptions about the nature of mind. Because as long as you are thinking about it, you're not in it. So if somebody tells you, I'm in the natural state most of the time, you know for sure they are not, because they are thinking about it. They are in mind. They are not in the natural state. Now, the nature of mind, which you realize through the practice of Treacher, or the natural state, it has its own inherent energy. And that energy will manifest whether you like it or not. That energy can manifest as samsara, it can manifest as nirvana. And so when you are in contemplation, in the natural state, then your energy, the rangtsal, the inherent energy of the nature of the mind, manifests as nangwa, as visions. And when you work with visions, then this is called tergyal. Tergyal means to leap over the top of something instantaneously. Tergyal do, as an adjective, means instantaneously. There's no separation there in time. So some people like to translate it as leap over. I think it's much better just to use the Tibetan word. English has a facility for taking outside words from other languages and making them into English words like Buddha, Dharma, Karma, Samsara. Well, we can do the same thing in Dzogchen. So I then use Treacher and tergyal. So I think we've now come to 12:30, so we have to break for lunch, and then we can resume later. And how much time do we need for lunch?
Well, we're